Today we're going to be looking at what is a function. If you read this correctly, it says a function has an input and an output with some relationship between the two. What's the relationship in this function? So for this one, the input is 1, and then there's some kind of relationship, and on the other side, when it comes out, there's 2. On this one, it goes from 2, and then there's some kind of relationship between them, and it goes to 4. The last one goes from 3 to 6. And you'll notice each time it's doubling from 1 to 2, from 2 to 4, and from 3 to 6. Therefore, the input we're going to mark here is being multiplied by 2. That's the correct answer for this question. In this next problem, it says, what color is the input for this function? So the input is usually on the left side here. So in this case, we would mark red because the function input is red. And the next question says, what is the output? And it's over here. The output is usually on the right side. And in this case, they are yellow. How would you describe the relationship between this function? Well, it goes from 1 to 4, from 2 to 5, from 3 red ones to 6 yellow ones. So the difference between 1 and 4 is 3. The difference between 2 and 5 is also 3. That is why I marked that you add 3 to the input each time you solve one of these problems. In this next problem, it says, what should go in blank 1? It says a function has a blank and a blank with some blank between the two. So if we go back again, of course, we can remember that it states each function has an input, then there's a relationship between them, and then over here, there's an output. So for this first question, for the first blank, we're going to put input. On the next question, of course, we're going to say output because each function has an input and an output. And the last question was some blank between the two. It's a relationship between the two. So those should be the 3 blanks for that question. And this next one says, how can I read this function? So when you see this fx, the way you literally read it is the function f of x is equal to 2 times x. If there's nothing between the 2 and the x, it's always going to be a multiply, 2 times x plus 3. And then how can we replace the variables in this function with numbers? Well, for instance, if we wanted to replace this x with 5, we would then say the function f of 5 is equal to 2 times, and we would take out the x and put 5. So we'd put a 5 here and a 5 here. And so we would say the function of 5 is equal to 2 times 5 plus 3. So let's go ahead and try one of these problems now. We're substituting 5 in for x. So we take out the x here and the x here. We put in 5 and we put in 5. So for f of 5, 2 times 5 is 10. And then we bring down the 3. And 10 plus 3 is going to give us 13 for our final answer. So the way we would read this is we would say f of 5 equals 13. And now we're going to try this problem. Again, whenever we see fx, it means we read it, the function f of x is equal to blank times 5. And so up here, blank times x. So here's x, and we see the negative 5 right here. So that means that in this first blank, we should write negative 5 because it's negative 5x. And are we subtracting 3 or adding 3? Up here it says minus, so we're going to put minus. So it's going to be 5x is minus 3. And how can we replace the variable in this function with numbers? Let's say we want to replace x with 7. So it would be the function of 7 is equal to negative 5. And again, we put a 7 here and a 7 here. So it's going to be negative 5 sevens. So negative 5 times 7 minus, so it's going to be minus 7. And then it's going to be minus, and then, of course, we have the 3. So we're going to put 3 in here. And it's going to be minus 3. So those should be all the blanks for that question. Now let's try and actually solve it. So here we have f of x equals negative 5x minus 3, and they want us, like we said before, to put in 7. So it's going to be f of 7 equals negative 5 times 7 minus 3. So what are we replacing the x with? Of course, it tells you up here. Whatever it says to substitute in for, that's what we're going to substitute in. So we're going to replace x with 7. And now we have this f of 7 is equal to negative 5 times 7 plus 3. And this negative 5 and 7 is a multiply, because whenever you have parentheses, that means multiply. So we're going to say negative 5 times 7. And finally, if we have negative 35 plus 3, let me just try it on a calculator here. Negative 35 plus 3 gives me negative 32. So we know it's going to be this one right here. Another way you can think of it is if you owe someone $35 and you pay them $3, you still owe them $32. So it's negative 32. So our final answer is f of 7. That should say 7, not 5. I apologize. F of 7 equals negative 32. On this next problem, now we have, again, solve f of x when it equals 2x minus 7 for when f is negative 9. So the blank, this thing up here, these things, when you have f of x, they're called functions. So we're going to write function here, the function f of x. The function f, I just said the second blank. This f of x, so it's going to be x, is equal to 2x's, so it's 2x's minus 7. So this should be 2x's right here, 2x's minus 7. And of course we said minus, so we're going to put minus. And then we need to replace, we said we're looking for f of negative 9, so we're going to take this negative 9 and put it in here for x and here for x. So it's going to be the function f of negative 9 is equal to 2 times, and we're going to put negative 9 here also, because we're putting in 2 times negative 9, is going to, when we're subtracting it from 7. So that should be all the blanks for that problem. And now, what would we plug in right here for x? We would plug in negative 9. So we're going to place x with negative 9. It's going to look like this. And we have 2 negative 9. Again, remember the parentheses mean multiply. So what would we do next is the 2 times negative 9, which would give us negative 18. Negative 18 minus 7, if I do that on the calculator, negative 18 minus 7 is negative 25. The way you might think of it is that you owe someone $18, you borrow $7 more from them, now you owe them 25. So our final answer here is f of 9 equals negative 25. That would be our final answer for this problem. What are the 3 parts of a function? Again, we're going to write this down here, that the 3 parts of a function are, the first part is called the input, the second part is called the output, and the last part is called the relationship. And if I were to describe the relationship here, it goes from 1 to 5 and 2. So this 5 is like 1 plus 4. So, and then they're also adding 2 each time. So, and then they go from 2 to 10, from 3 to 15, and they're also adding 2 each time. So if I were to describe this, I would say f of x equals, they're going from 1 to 5, from 2 to 10, and from 3 to 15. So it seems like they're multiplying whatever number this red one is by 5 to get this part, and then adding 2. So I would say 5x because they're multiplying the input by 5, and then they're adding 2. So I just say plus 2. So the answer is f of x equals 5x plus 2. And that's the final part of this problem. Finish all these problems and then make sure you turn it, make sure that you've done all these problems, and I will check it later on today.